Hello, my friends. This situation remains very difficult. So far, all the changes been recorded along the front line are for the worse. The Russians haven't run out of forces and are actively continuing their advance. Over the past week, changes along the front line have been recorded frequently, and their results are already in. It's reported that overall, the Russians managed to capture an additional 44 square kilometers over the past week. While this is less than in previous weeks, which is somewhat reassuring, the success is still on the side of the Russians. Now, let's move on to the situation in the Kursk region. Here, the Russians continue to shell the border areas in the Sumy region, despite all the statements from the armed forces of Ukraine and President Zelensky, they continue to advance. Yesterday, the advance of another 2 kilometers and 300 meters near the village of Novoivanivka was confirmed on the map, which could soon lead to the loss of Lyubymivka. There is even information that the Russians once again killed Ukrainian POWs. The Russians violated the rules and customs of war, once again executing 9 Ukrainian soldiers in the Kursk region. According to our sources in the 1st Separate Tank Brigade, it became known that on October 10th, the Russians shot down drone fighters and collaborators in the area of Zelený Shlях. Further details are still being clarified, but it's known that men took up a position thinking they were relatively behind the front line, but were forced into contact with Russian forces and were shot. Their ammunition supply was limited and they were forced to surrender. Overall, the situation in the Kursk region is not very optimistic. The defense forces are conducting stabilization measures, but it's extremely difficult to regain lost ground. In fact, today, we must acknowledge that the armed forces of Ukraine are surrounding the Russians in the Novoivanivka area and other sections of the front. However, since the initiative is now on the side of the Russians and they significantly outnumber us, they are penetrating the defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine and moving toward the border. But not all is lost yet. The armed forces of Ukraine are continuing to destroy the advancing Russians. In the Kharkiv direction, the shelling continues but remains minimal for now. All assaults in the areas of Vovchansk and the village of Tikhe have ceased, and so far there have been no changes along the front line. In the Kupiansk direction, however, activity remains very high. There are numerous reports of shelling in the frontline areas. It's evident that the Russians are conducting artillery preparation to break through further. Today, fighting continues in the direction of Kucherivka with assaults on Petropavlivka, and to the south, the battles for Kolesnikivka and Kruglякivka haven't stopped. However, there have been no changes in this area over the past day. In the direction of Borova, the Russians are assaulting Lozova and Vishneva. There is also a significant amount of shelling, but for now, the Ukrainian armed forces are successfully repelling all attacks. To the south, activity is also quite high, with the Russians assaulting Rakivka and Novomykhailivka. In the Kreminna direction, the Russians are assaulting Nevsky and, as before, breaking through near Novosadova, with ongoing battles around Toretsk as well. Shelling continues at the usual intensity, but there have been no changes along the front line. In the Siversk direction, battles are ongoing for Verkhnyokamensky, Ivanodarivka, and in the vicinity of Vyimka. The Russians are attempting to get as close as possible to Siversk, but for now, the Ukrainian armed forces are successfully repelling all attacks, and there have been no changes along the front line over the past day. In the Chasiv Yar direction, the Russians are still trying to break through into the town, but every day they suffer losses, and those who manage to cross the canal don't return. Despite their heavy losses, the assaults haven't stopped. Offensive actions are also taking place toward the village of Stupochke, but they haven't seen any success there either, and the front line hasn't changed over the past day. In the Toretsk direction, intense battles for Toretsk continue, with street fighting persistent, but there have been no significant advances by the Russians so far. Attacks on Lyubymivka and Shalin remain at the same level, with no changes over the past day. In the Pokrovsk direction, the situation remains difficult. However, due to light rain, the situation has worsened slightly for the Russians. The front line remains unchanged, but the Russians continue their assaults on Myrolyubivka, the outskirts of Mirnograd, Lysivka, and are pushing toward the village of Shevchenko. The situation in Selidove is similarly difficult, as the Russians continue to attack the settlements from all sides, relentlessly shelling and leveling the town. However, for now, the Ukrainian armed forces are managing to repel all attacks. Further south, the Russians have already begun breaking through towards Novoivanivka, which is a very troubling sign. They are stretching the front line further, and it seems they still have reserves for this effort. Battles are also ongoing in the areas of Tsukurene, Novoselidivka, Izmailivka, Hernik, Zoryane, and Kurakhivka. Over the past day, there have been more than 50 assaults across the Pokrovsk direction. The intensity remains very high. In the Kurakhove direction, offensive actions are being carried out on Kurakhove and the village of Dalny, with ongoing assaults on the village of Antonivka. However, there have been no changes over the past day, though the situation remains extremely difficult. It's becoming clear, little by little, the Russians are managing to make some progress. In the Vuhledar direction, the Russians are assaulting Bogoyavlenka and shelling the village, yet there have been no changes along the front line in the past day, as all attacks have been repelled. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians continue their attacks near the village of Rabotine, targeting the fields. They are also shelling frontline areas, but there have been no changes in the situation. In the Kherson direction, the Russians persist in their attempts to break through to the islands near Hola Pristan, but all their efforts have been unsuccessful. Shelling of the right bank continues, but the situation remains stable. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.